All right, welcome back. So we're going to do this video. We're going to combine this into one. And so I want to talk about some rules here, and I also want to talk about the NHL scheduling that I've had this discussion of. And there are people who've tried to correct me on this and said, well, no, don't you understand the days of the week? Is it? Yeah, no, I understand how the days of the week work. And I understand why. I just think it's kind of silly. So I want to start off talking about the 4 rules that are up here. And we can start with offside because I've already talked about that a bit today in the news video that I did, on how I think that offside, as it's currently called, is fine. But if we're going to simplify the rule, I'm all for that. If you precede the puck into the zone, you're offside. Done. That's it. That is how I would take the whole control thing. I'd pitch it. I'd say control. Who cares? You preceded the puck into the zone. It doesn't matter. Offside should just be offside. And if you're all for abolishing the rule and the NHL does that, great. We'd have a bit of a Wild West out there on the ice, but coaches would adapt, players would adapt, and the game would definitely change if you took out offside, as it changed when they allowed the 2-line pass, but the NHL would adjust. It would just create some ridiculous games at first. I think we'd see some ridiculous scores as well if that happened, and a lot of complaining, which is kind of standard for when it comes to sports and fans in general. So yeah, the offside, I again, if they do make that change, I would just like to see, if you are ahead of the play, that's it. You're ahead of the puck, that's it. And it doesn't matter the control thing, that's gone. You cannot precede the puck into the zone, and it would take away that gray area. Goalie interference, I did a video on this not too long ago, where I talked about goalie interference being as it is. And I think they're pretty consistent in the calls on it. I know there are players that aren't happy. I know that's one thing that was talked about by Connor McDavid last night, too, in the media scrum. As a rule that they don't really understand, but I think that it's pretty straightforward that if you contact the goalie in the crease, then the goal doesn't count. I don't know that you need to change the rule much. I don't think the NHL is going to, but again, if they did, I think they would just simplify it. Any contact, that's done. It's no goal. There's contact. You can allow certain times, so you can have the clock on there. And you can say, all right, it's contact within 5-10 seconds, however many seconds you want to make it, and say that's contact within that amount of time, then it's no goal. And it, again, they always have the clock on some of those replays. It's easy enough to see that. And then that'll be it. You would take out the argument of, did he have time to reset? You would just say a certain amount of time, and that's it. And of course, there's other incidents with stoppages that I don't have on the board that might be related to goalie interference. When a referee does or doesn't blow the whistle is always a discussion. The one thing that's not on the board, because I haven't really seen that this year, is a referee saying, well, yeah, that's a goal, but I intended to blow the whistle. I haven't seen that one this year. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen, but I haven't seen it yet. The idea of, yeah, that was a goal. It's a shame I was planning to blow the whistle, which is something that we've seen, and it's a real head scratcher for me. There is, of course, the continuation as well, that if they blow the whistle, but the puck continues to move, so it didn't stop, and it continues to move and goes into the net, then it's a goal. If the puck stops and then it's hit, then it's not a goal. And of course, if the goal comes off and you score and the defending player knocks the goal off and you score on that play, it counts. But if it's your second opportunity, it doesn't. That's just an odd rule. That's an odd one, but it seems to be pretty consistent in how that one's called as well. Icing's one that I've seen, obviously off the Boston-Arizona game. The idea that they blew that call. Yes. The puck, it shouldn't matter if it goes through the crease. That doesn't wave off offside. The puck can hit the post, and if it hits the post and goes into the corner, it's still, or not offside, icing. If it hits the post and goes into the corner, it's still icing. So, yeah, that's a blown call. But as I've always said, you play to the whistle. So for the player coming back, you have to keep playing until that whistle. You have to keep playing, and you have to be careful coming back. So, does a blown call happen here and there? Yes. The same with offside. I have lost count of how many times watching a game I will say out loud, plays offside. Plays offside. And then as soon as the puck gets cleared, I go, and it doesn't matter. But I will very often say that play, and sometimes it's not even close. I'm trying to remember which game I was watching the other night where you see the linesman do this, and I was like, what? You can see the guy at the top is nowhere near he's way inside the zone, but all right, pal, cool. And again, these calls, when there's no goal on the play, nobody really cares, right? But the game is very fast. I'm not trying to cast any shade on linesmen because that's a very difficult job. A lot of stress, very difficult job. And you have just that you can look down the blue line, but you may not have a complete view of said blue line, and you've got to make that call. So you're far more likely to say that play's offside or onside when it may not be, rather than blow the whistle and say it's offside when it's not. So, and again, they have to kind of cross their fingers, and as long as there's no goal, it's going to be okay. But it is one of those things, too, that I wonder if the NHL keeps track of the plays that are offside. This morning I talked about how, you have your group of people, you have somebody who's watching every single game, right? So you have one guy who's dedicated to each game. Do they make sure how many offsides aren't called that should be and how many are called offside that may not be? And do they track that, pass that information on to Stephen Walkham, who I believe is still in control of officiating, and then what would happen with that data? So do they have some kind of a data sheet that tells them how often certain linesmen might be off on offside and onside and getting that call right? I would imagine they do, because they have that with referees, where they grade the referees. It is always going on. And if a referee's not very good at their job, they're not going to last in the NHL. Insert name of referee in the comment section below that you believe has kept their job despite not doing a good job. But in general, they do have a system. We just don't get to see that, right? And again, I would be fine with them having some kind of a documentary where they don't have to get into who, but they could say, yeah, we had a game the other night. Referees just, and you can get away from doing the specifics, because again, you wouldn't want to be in a situation where one referee gets called out in a documentary like that for something that other referees have been guilty of as well. Head hits are always a discussion. You will never get the head hits out of the NHL. There have been talks at times from certain players. Eric Lindros stands out as one, but he's not the only one that said, body checks should be out. That will never happen. So for anybody who's concerned that body checking is going to go, or that fighting is going to go, that's not going to happen. The NHL is not going to ban them. I would even argue they don't need to ban fighting, because fighting has dropped so far from where it was in the 80s or 90s that it's not a big deal. It's still a pretty big attraction. It's not like people get angry when a fight breaks out and they're like, fight. What? This is stupid. Boo. You don't see that. You really don't. Generally, the fans are excited. The players enjoy it. I do sometimes get concerned for officials jumping in too early. That's like, look, those guys are still actively punching, and now you're going in to grab. Either you could get a punch, which has happened, or there could be a sucker punch that takes place because you grab one guy, the other guy's not grabbed yet, so he's still wailing away. Not great, and that's where I reveal I'm a southpaw. So, yeah, head hits I don't think are going anywhere. I think that for the National Hockey League, obviously with what happened with with Hronek this week, Red Wing, I'm in the right territory. But with what happened this week with Hronek and the fact that, yeah, you have concussions. It's a fast game. It's a hard-hitting game. And sometimes the bigger injuries can come from a guy trying to avoid throwing a hit, where we'll see a guy trying to get out of the way, and then it's this awkward collision, and you can end up with an actually worse injury. Your best bet is to continue to go through the hit that protects the hitter, and the guy getting hit has to brace himself and has to be ready for that. I say that as a guy of smaller stature myself. If it's a situation where hits are going to be happening, I will be taking said hit, and I should be aware of where everybody is, and especially where the bigger guys are, because if I take a hit, that happens. Although when I play street hockey now, it's the meetups and we don't play that full contact, but there was a time where that can happen. So head hits are just it is in the game. I don't think they're nearly as bad as they were 20 to 25 years ago. They're nowhere near as common as they were 20 to 25 years ago. Scott Stevens, you can load up any Scott Stevens highlight reel package of his hits and count off how many of those would be borderline to a penalty in today's game. And there are a lot of them. Now, if Scott Stevens played now, he would have changed the way he played. He would not be throwing the hits the same as he did then. But he wasn't the only one. He was just the best known. There were a lot of defensemen that you hit a guy, and if you hit him in the head, you hit him in the head. Keep your head up. It's on. You're basically saying it's on the guy who's taking the hit to be ready. And on some level, that's accurate. That for the person getting hit, you have to be aware of your surroundings. You have to be careful, but at the same time, the guy throwing the hit has to be aware of that vulnerable player too. It is a gray area that will always be there. That one I don't think the NHL can change. So I want to talk about scheduling. Because I think I get it, right? TNT, it has their deal, ESPN has their deal, and Rogers has their deal. So these are deals that the NHL really wants to cultivate. These are your nationwide audiences. What's interesting to me is, looking at the scheduling, TNT's games are on Wednesdays. They have the doubleheaders on Wednesdays. This is the night that I keep being told, hey, Wednesday is the NBA's night, so that's why the NHL doesn't schedule very much for Wednesdays. Then it's odd for TNT to choose Wednesdays. Now, I'm not saying that they're wrong, but it's odd because TNT already had AEW Dynamite on there. AEW Dynamite gets moved around because of the National Hockey League coming in. And I find that whole thing odd. Why not pick Thursdays? Why not do TNT Thursday Night Hockey? And I think it was ESPN Thursday Night Hockey way, way, way back in the day, wasn't it? I'm just my brain's kind of recycling this information going, wasn't it Thursday that ESPN had way back in the day? Thursday Night Hockey sounds familiar to me. But at any rate, if they're on Wednesdays, the interesting part is they get games that aren't necessarily great. There have been times where I've seen the games that are going to be on TNT that night, and I think those are pretty bad games. And the reason I say that is simple. The NHL is about TV and attendance. So you want to make sure that you're going to sell as many tickets as possible, and you want to make sure you're getting your TV audience. So Wednesdays, if that's an NBA night, that doesn't work, right? So if they have to schedule around it because of the NBA, because the NBA, it's on Wednesday, then that doesn't work. And then you're getting games that won't get as high of ratings. Let's say it's Arizona and Anaheim. Well, that's not going to get very good ratings. It might be a Wednesday night game, but it's not going to get great ratings. So it's not going to give you your TV. If it's an Anaheim-Arizona game, your attendance may not be great. And there have definitely been matchups where it might be in an arena where your attendance might not be fantastic. So this is why I look at their schedule and say, I think they go too far with keeping it lopsided. If you're going to have your TNT games on Wednesday, make sure you've got prime matchups. So make sure you've got Vegas and Washington, a Stanley Cup rematch. You schedule that for a Wednesday. Make sure that you've got the New York Rangers and New York Islanders. Put that one on a Wednesday and have that as your back-to-back. Have Washington and Vegas, Rangers and Islanders. Schedule really big games for your Wednesdays. And have them more important, because this is the thing. When you get into, like last night, you have 8 games starting at the same time. The amount of money you're making from TV on those 8 games, when you don't have a national game there, now in Canada you do, but Canada you don't have to worry about scheduling around the NBA. There's a team in Toronto, yes. Do they draw well in Canada? Absolutely. I think there's room for growth for the National Basketball Association in Canada, but you can absolutely have nationwide games in Canada on any night of the week. You wouldn't have to schedule around the NBA, the NFL, or of course baseball. Now baseball is really not a concern. They don't come in until April. And I do question how much overlap there is between the NFL, the NBA, and the NHL. They're different fan bases. And so I sometimes think it's a little bit of an overreaction. Like November I thought was ridiculous. There were definitely games they could have moved to a Friday or moved to a Wednesday. And I think if your question mark is, okay, how do we get the most eyeballs on this? I would come back to last night's games. You have Dallas and Washington. Have that game on your Wednesday. Throw that on TNT. And then that one can be, hey, we're going to see if Ovi breaks that record, right? It was broadcast nationwide in Canada last night. I'm pretty sure that one was on Sportsnet Pacific. And I think you'd get better ratings on TV. It's not going to affect your attendance. People are going to go to the game in Washington anyways because they could be watching history. Make sure that those games are on when there's fewer games. So on the nights that there are fewer games, have bigger games on, maybe? Which can be hard to say because we do have pretty good parity in the NHL, and from one year to the next, you will have turnover about who's in the playoffs. Of course, for Hockey Night in Canada, they have games every Saturday. The NBA's on Saturdays as well. I actually downloaded the NBA app and went through their schedule. Their Saturdays are pretty busy. And so the NHL doesn't seem to stay away from the Saturday games with the NBA as much as, say, Thursday or, not Thursday, Wednesday or Monday, right? Of course, Monday you've got Monday Night Football. But that can be overblown too. You can have some really crappy Monday Night Football games. You can have matchups that are just like, why? Why are you doing this? The Jacksonville Jaguars and the New York Jets. Oh, okay. And I'm just using that as examples. I know both of those teams are not necessarily the embarrassment they've been in previous seasons. But it is odd to me to schedule it as if you're trying to avoid something, which again, I understand from a TV perspective. I understand it more from a national TV perspective. So the next ESPN game is the New York Rangers at Chicago, which is on Sunday. And it's not that long ago people were saying, well, hey, they don't schedule games on Sunday because they're avoiding the NFL. This game in Chicago is going to go up directly against Sunday Night Football, as far as I know. Sunday Night Football, still a thing, still a regular season. So I just find that odd because ESPN, this is a nationwide broadcast, and the nationwide broadcasts are the ones that bring in more money. So I find it strange that the nationwide broadcasts are on the days and the nights that I keep being told, hey, the NHL doesn't want the games on those nights. So why are the national broadcasts on those nights? Why isn't ESPN on their main channel showing us a hockey game on a Tuesday or on a Saturday? Why not jump onto the same night as Hockey Night in Canada? Because they chose the New York Rangers at Chicago on Sunday. It's two original 6 teams. They're probably guessing they're going to get good ratings, and they're probably not wrong. The one thing with the NHL, and we hear this a lot in general, is the idea of the Big Four. So you have the NFL, which is the king, right? The NBA, I think, is number 2 now. I do, and I know baseball, 162-game schedule, ridiculous contracts and all that, but I do consider NBA to kind of be maybe number 2. Could be number 3 behind Major League Baseball. The NHL is a pretty distant 4th. So when you look at evaluations of teams and which ones are worth most money, NHL teams generally are worth a lot less than other leagues. But as I've said in a video not too long ago, there's more value with NHL teams than there is in the other leagues. There might be too much hype about the other leagues. I'm not trying to suggest that the NHL should just balance the entire schedule and ignore potential scheduling conflicts. But I think they go to extremes that make it tough for us as NHL fans to follow all of it. I don't follow the NBA. This year, I have not been following the NFL nearly as much as I have in previous years. Major League Baseball, I don't have a ton of concern. I keep track of the stats and the standings, and that's about it. But obviously, and not just for the channel, but because this is how it's always been, I prefer the National Hockey League. I will watch NHL games. And I don't think I'm the only one. I think for the NHL, part of it is they're trying to get past that niche audience and appeal to a larger audience. I think they have a product that can appeal to that larger audience. I think the scoring being up is big. Hyping up superstars would help. They don't hype superstars nearly enough. Not like the other leagues. One thing that really helped the NBA was hyping up rivalries. So while the NHL's looking at potentially creating more rivalry games and maybe going to an 84-game schedule to accommodate that, and if they go to an 84-game schedule, I can come up with a setup. I'm perfectly fine with talking to the NHL about that. I'm only mildly kidding. Back way before I had a channel, I created a 32-team league, and I had an 84-game schedule, and it worked perfect. Everything was balanced out. And I even had a schedule matrix that completely worked, where I could just plug in teams' names. I just had Team A versus Team B, Team C, like all of them with letters, and then I could just plug in the team, and it worked great. And it was a balanced schedule. It wasn't crazy. There weren't a bunch of back-to-backs, but I didn't have to worry about building dates. I didn't have to worry about availabilities. I didn't have to worry about media. So it was way easier for me to create that with my fictitious whatever, but it can work. I think the 84 games, 32 teams can absolutely work. The draw here is they're trying to increase their income, and they're trying to make more money. And the NHL's making a lot of money. So while people get mad about the salary cap being lower, the salary cap's lower because of all the money lost over the previous 3 years. So they're trying to recoup the money they lost. And of course, while the owners lose half, the players lose half. So until all that money is recuperated, the salary cap is not going to go up by a ton. In fact, raising the salary cap by $1 million per team this year might make it tougher for them to have a bigger salary cap increase next year, because that's money you end up with escrow and all these other fun things in there as well. I don't think the NHL changes anything. I think Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday will still be their primary days for games. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, not so much. I remember growing up, Monday was very often a day without games. What is a game without days? Anyways, I don't want to get into like some kind of Shakespearean thing here. But it was different. It was a 21-team league. The most games you could have in a night was 10. Now it's 16. So the way that the scheduling is done when you have 21 teams, it is much easier to follow than when you have 32. And like I said, when you have 8 games starting at the same time, games are going to get forgotten. Games are going to get overlooked. You're not going to get a huge ratings boost. Your attendance might be higher. I should take a look at attendance around the NHL and figure out what the difference is for each day of the week, because we've had that discussion on the channel before where I've done a recap and I've said the attendance in this city wasn't very good, and people will say, well, yeah, but it's middle of the week, which to me is kind of odd. I understand that there are people who can't go to games during the middle of the week. And so there's that argument there too, right? So there you go. Me talking about scheduling, me talking about rules. It doesn't get more exciting than that. I would love for it to get more exciting. It just doesn't. But I would like to see a schedule that just doesn't have all of that going on at once. Because if you took like last night's Anaheim-Montreal game and moved it by a day, would that have made a difference to anything related to the NBA, NFL, or anything else they might be competing with? No. So that's kind of how I look at it. Is some of these games I totally understand they need to be on those nights that are packed, but not in every instance. I think there could be some movement there that would make a lot of sense. But let me know your thoughts in the comments section below, both about the rules and about the schedule. Again, it doesn't get more exciting than this. I don't know that I can top this content. I might as well retire now. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Not wearing a watch. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you browsed your way through, you just happened upon this video. And hey, thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.